Thank you so much. I'm very sorry that I couldn't be in Athens to celebrate with you today on this momentous occasion. But I am very happy to say a few words about Pia while you're looking at this wonderful slide of photos of her. Pia Guldager Bilde first studied classical archaeology at the University of Copenhagen, but moved on to find a home at the University of Aarhus, where she graduated in 1990 and remained until her death. Following a research fellowship, she was appointed assistant professor at the Institute of Classical Archaeology in 1993. And in 1993 till 2002, she was director of the Museum of Antiquities at the university, curating exhibitions and publications, and she remained on the board of the museum until 2011. In 1998, she brought together the Nordic institutes in Rome in an ambitious effort to excavate an imperial villa by Lake Nemi, spurred on by her great interest in the Diana Sanctuary and its surroundings in the Alban Mountains south of Rome. Her commitment to this project was, however, interrupted by another great adventure. In the period 2002 to 2010, Pia directed the Danish National Research Foundation's Center for Black Sea Studies at the University of Aarhus. Her professional ambitions and ability to establish strong networks turned the center into a flourishing, internationally renowned research environment. In its 8 years of existence, the center published 16 volumes of the Black Sea Studies series of conference proceedings and monographs in English, as well as 4 smaller volumes in Danish. An unusually intelligent, versatile, and indomitable scholar, Pia published on a wide number of subjects, but Hellenistic pottery remained closest to her heart. She was one of the founding members of the International Association of Research on Pottery of the Hellenistic period, and she spent the last years of her life working tirelessly to complete the volume on mold-made bowls of the Black Sea region we are presenting tonight. Pia died on January the 10th, 2013, shortly before her 52nd birthday. And even if we still miss her, her passions were strong and her achievements great. The pictures on the slides originate mostly from our fieldwork in Crimea in 2007, and here you see the sides of Pia that are not mentioned in her CV. Her love of company and dancing, her thoughtfulness and eagerness to celebrate others' achievements, her insatiable curiosity, her surprisingly raucous laugh and wicked sense of humor, her tireless efforts on behalf of all those who knew her. Pia, with this work, we will remember you and we honor you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Friends and colleagues, as Sanne just mentioned, Pia's manuscript was in an advanced state of completion at the time of her premature death in 2013. And her husband handed the relevant files over to Kristina with the express wish that her work be published. Kristina later brought Troels Myrup Christensen of the University of Aarhus and me in on this enterprise, which has now, we are happy to say, has come to fruition. Our first step was to transfer Pia's archive and her manuscript from Aarhus to the National Museum in Copenhagen. And this happened in 2019 with the assistance of Jakob Munch-Højde, a colleague of ours from the Black Sea Center, who had been the first guardian of the archive. The next step was to identify what needed to be done before the manuscript could go to print. The major, but by no means only, issue was that Pia had only finalized a small part of the crucial chapter on the mold-made bowls from Ephesus. The illustrations presented another challenge. Pia had over the years drawn, described and photographed several thousand mainly fragmentary vessels during her journeys in the Black Sea region and visits to various museums. But her original drawings needed to be scanned and cleaned up before they could be used as illustrations, and this was also the case with the photograph. Our next task was to find a publishing house capable of taking on such a huge and complex publication, and we extend our sincere thanks to Brill for having accepted to do so. But the project received an enormous boost when Susan Rotroff, the leading expert on Hellenistic pottery, most generously volunteered to assist in the endeavor in April 2020, an offer which we accepted with great gratitude. As editor of this volume, Susan has worked tirelessly and with the greatest of care on completing the text by filling out gaps and correcting numerous inconsistencies. And it's quite certain that the monograph would never have seen the light of day without her invaluable assistance. So Kristina, Troels, and I extend our sincerest thanks to Susan for turning Pia's unfinished manuscript into a publishable book. In May 2020, we succeeded in obtaining a grant from the University of Aarhus, from the Aarhus University Research Foundation, and in December, a further grant from Elisabeth Munksgaard Fonden, which was later followed by a grant from the New Carlsberg Foundation. We are indeed most grateful for these donations, which enabled us to have all of Pia's drawings expertly scanned and cleaned up by Marie-Louise Jan Hansen, and we are no less grateful to Winther-Jacobsen, who graciously undertook the enormous task of cleaning up the photographs. We also extend our warmest thanks to the many other individuals, Pia's friends and colleagues, who helped us out with various aspects of the publications. There are indeed far too many for us to mention individually here, but we wish to single out Patricia Kögler and Renate Higginbotham-Rosenthal, who provided valuable assistance in checking Pia's bibliography and by assembling a separate bibliography of scholarship on Mouldmade bowls, published after 2012, when illness prevented Pia from doing more work on the manuscript. And our thanks also go to Valentina Mordvin-Seva, who kindly checked the transcriptions of names in the bibliography written in the Cyrillic alphabet. Throughout, our guiding principle was to preserve Pia's text as intact as we could in order to publish a volume as close as possible to what she intended. We hope and think that we succeeded in this, and we dedicate our collective efforts to her memory. And with these words, I will pass the word on to Susan Rotroff.
Thank you very much, Sana. I'm very, very thrilled to be here and very thrilled to be able to kind of bring closure to this very, very long project that all of us have worked very, very hard on. It's been great to work with these colleagues, many of whom I still have never met in person, but it was as though every time one felt one was about to falter, somebody else would rush in and catch the ball and carry it on. So it was a very wonderful collaboration. Let's see. Let me just, collaboration continues. Now it should go? Okay, that's it. Okay. So the manuscript that Pia left us when she departed this world over 10 years ago was an ambitious one. In her words, the goals were first to present primarily to a Western audience a comprehensive corpus of Mouldmade bowls which have come to light in the northern and northwestern Black Sea region. And secondly, to employ this corpus to draw some general conclusions concerning the major production places represented in our assemblages. And lastly, on the basis of the same material, to consider issues such as production, workshop organization, distribution and trade, and iconography and meaning. Unfortunately, Pia did not leave us a finished product. Some references and documentation were missing, and most difficult of all, her important chapter on the mold-made bowls of Ephesus existed only in skeletal form. The manuscript could easily have been relegated to a dusty shelf or at best a university archive, had it not been for the vision, determination, and labors of Pia's colleagues, about which you have just heard. I was a latecomer to the effort, becoming involved in 2019, first as a reader for Brill and as an advocate for the work's publication, and ultimately as its editor, tasked with filling in gaps and completing that all-important Ephesian chapter. And as my final act as editor, it is my happy duty to present the now published book to you this evening. Pia begins with a section disarmingly entitled General Consideration. It revisits most of the major concerns that have arisen in the study of this genre of pottery over the past century and more. A chapter on methodology includes, among other issues, a thorough discussion of the different types of evidence that can be used to identify workshops, as well as the distribution of bowls in both time, that is, how to establish a chronology, and space. Linking both time and space is a fascinating study of what Pia calls the second wave of Egyptian inspiration, a reconstruction of the spread of the Baroque style in mold-made bowls, with wide implications both for chronology and for an understanding of the forces at work behind the phenomenon. This is based on an iconographical detail, the so-called animated nelumbo. Every field has its jargon. A rounded petal conventionally associated with the Nymphaea lotus plant, a species of water lily, and inhabited by a miniature figured scene. Here it is a symplegma featuring the embrace of a reclining Psyche and the winged Eros behind her. And it makes up part of a vegetal calyx featuring nelumbo petals and swirling acanthus leaves. Incidentally, in her chapter on iconography, Pia scrutinizes the anatomy of the various species of water lily. I learned a lot from that. Concluding that what we have long called a nelumbo petal is in fact the sepal, not the petal, of a Nymphaea lotus, not a nelumbo, hence the quotation marks around nelumbo, an editorial detail upon which Pia insisted. But I digress. To return to the animated nelumbo, others have noticed that this motif appears in far-flung locations, on Ephesian bowls that have generally been considered prototype, and on bowls produced in central Italy, the northern Peloponnese, and Asia Minor. Pia plots their diffusion, combining the reconstructions of Maria Teresa Marabini-Moeuvres, Gerard Sibert, and Ulrich Hausmann, established experts on the mold-made bowls of Italy and the Peloponnese, respectively, and they saw it going from Ephesus to Italy and thence to the northern Peloponnese. But Pia draws a more complicated picture. She speculates that this compositional gambit is a direct reflection of Ptolemaic silverware of the second quarter of the 2nd century. Although the animated nelumbo does not occur on extant silver, the Baroque calyx in which it nestles is a recurring feature, as documented here on silver bowls from Egypt like the one on the screen. Pia argues that the silver circulated through the diplomatic efforts of Ptolemy VI Philometor in the early 160s was cultivating his allies at Rome and in the Achaean League for support against the Seleucids. The lines of influence might look something like the diagram below. If Pia's reconstruction squares with recent revisions to the chronology of Italian bowls proposed by Maria Kristina Liotta, this would offer a terminus postquem in the early 160s for the Baroque calyx and the animated nelumbo, and an important chronological peg for the middle history of the mold-made bowls, and the mold-made bowls are sadly lacking in chronological pegs. Chapter 4 delves into the mechanics of production, using models such as that developed by DPS Peacock. in pottery in the Roman world to investigate workshop organization and probing the differences between industries consisting of nucleated workshops and the mega production that developed in Ephesus, which conforms to Peacock's manufactory. A full chapter is devoted to supplementary shapes, forms other than plain bowls, like jugs, amphoras, and a long list of others, which have received little comment since Courbet published a plate illustrating Ephesian examples a little over a century ago. With its catalog of over 600 items, this chapter showcases the variety of these vessels and points to industries that took a special interest in them. It points as well to the diversity of the Hellenistic symposium assemblage. Finally, a chapter on iconography and interpretation encourages us to approach mold-made bowl imagery with greater respect. Pia points out that the imagery of the bowls has generally been considered to be, quote, almost exclusively decorative and hence without any potential meaning. She argues to the contrary that at least at the point when stamps and compositions were first devised, the images were deliberately chosen and their juxtaposition was not random. She makes some exhilarating claims here regarding the eros driving a two-horse chariot, for instance, a common motif on Ephesian bowls that is repeated over several stamp generations, and you can see a larger earlier one above and a smaller later one below. Pia wonders whether the model might be philosophical rather than mythological. Could this be a reference to the famous chariot race of Plato's Phaedrus, where the soul, in the guise of a charioteer, strives to control his mismatched pair, a noble and an ignoble steed? Her most extended attempt to tease meaning from a mold-made vessel, however, is her study of a large relief situla found in an Olbian grave in 1899 and now in the Hermitage. You can see the situla on the left and von Stern's 1902 drawing of its upper register in the center of the screen. Pia's 2005 paper on the situla was published in Bosporsky Phänomen, not perhaps the most accessible venue, so the gist of her argument is repeated in the book. The uppermost register of the situla combines four scenes that are well known to Hellenistic iconographers as the unvarying decoration of a series of small terracotta altars, the so-called Tarentine altars, though they probably don't come from Taranto. On the right, a well-preserved example in Oxford. Although these have been studied since the beginning of the 20th century, no one has been able to extract a coherent story from the four juxtaposed scenes, which always occur in the same order. A woman wreathing a trophy, Poseidon and Amymone, Cythera player and a woman, generally identified as Apollo and Leto, and Dionysus embraced by a satyr and a woman, probably Ariadne. Pia tweaks the meanings of the individual scenes, then assembles them as stations on the soul's journey towards an ecstatic union with Dionysus, or, as she puts it, a roadmap to salvation. A woman adorning a tomb, not a trophy, represents the turning point from life to death. Amymone, as the namesake of a stream that debouched into the marshes at Lerna and marks the entry to the underworld. The Cytherist and his audience, in Pia's view, Orpheus and Persephone, rather than Apollo and Leto, they place us in the halls of the Queen of the Dead. And finally, the Dionysiac trio symbolizes, quote, a return to the light and the heavenly bliss promised by Dionysus and his followers. What do you think? Is this a flight of fancy, reading too much into a series of stock scenes, or a viable explanation of the enduring popularity of the four scenes on altars and bowls? Whether Pia has cracked the code or not, isn't it simply too lazy to accept the proposition that their choice has no meaning at all? Parts 2 and 3 return to the hard facts of the data. The mold-made vessels organized according to their places of production based on Pia's study of over 5,600 vessels from 11 Pontic sites, most of which she handled, photographed, and often drew herself. The material is spread over site storerooms and museums, mostly in Russia and the Ukraine. Much is unpublished or published in places that are not easily accessible to Western scholars or inadequately illustrated. Pia collected this information at a time of extraordinary warming in East-West relations. The access that she enjoyed is now a thing of the past, and who knows how long will pass before such a project will be possible again. Each chapter includes a summary of research on the industry, a description of its products, their fabric, shape, and decoration, their relative and absolute chronology, and their distribution, ending with a catalog. This is the heart of the book, amply fulfilling the goal of presenting the bowls to a Western audience. The people of the northern and northwestern shores of the Black Sea were avid consumers of mold-made bowls, but not prolific producers. Almost all of the bowls, especially those found in the western part of the study area, were imported from the Mediterranean, mostly from the western coast of Asia Minor. Pia reviews the products of the well-known production centers at Athens, Pergamon, Ephesus, and Knidos. But the most outstanding contribution of her study is the definition of workshops located in Elis. Bowls from this stretch of the Asia Minor coast make up nearly 1/5 of the Black Sea corpus, and their identification and analysis occupy 6 chapters of her book. Interest in mold-made bowls signed by the maker Kirbase goes back to at least the middle of the 19th century, as documented by this fragment published by Count Alexei Uvarov in 1851. The medallion is distinctive, a profile of a woman wearing a turreted crown, and profiles on these medallions are very, very rare, and surrounded by the signature Kirbe, the distinctively Pontic form of the genitive of the unique and non-Greek name Kirbase. This and the fact that almost all of the examples come from the Black Sea seemed to mark them as Pontic products. But many Black Sea scholars have long argued for an origin in Asia Minor. That view is now supported by recent archaeometric analysis that points to Kymi as the home of the workshop, thus demonstrating that distribution patterns are not a sure guide to the place of production. In his 1990 book on Greek pottery in the Black Sea area, Jan Bozek collected 20 examples from this workshop. 20 years later, I was rather pleased with myself to have increased the number to 49. But Pia's corpus humbles us with its 552 examples, combining those from her 11 sites with published material from elsewhere. The size of this collection enabled her to define the shop in detail, and she traces the work of its 4 potters, not one, through the 30 years of its existence, from the second quarter of the 2nd century until the late 140s. Kirbase, the most prolific stamper with 97 signatures, Pausis with 23, Xenodotus with 7, and the sole example of a potter named Xenodoulos stamped on a bowl from a tomb at Tomis. Unfortunately, that bowl could not be found when Pia visited the Institute of Archaeology in Bucharest, where it is said to be stored, so we have only the old photographs published 50 years ago to document it. Pia's chapter on this production, now christened the Meter Medallion Workshop, makes it possible to identify unsigned fragments easily, so the corpus will undoubtedly grow. Pia also identified 3 other Aeolian workshops that probably went into production as the Meter Medallion Workshop was exiting the scene. Workshop A at Kymi consists of a small corpus distinguished by a miniaturist style, and 2 more shops operated at unspecified centers elsewhere in Elis, most likely in the towns of Alea or Patane. Aeolus B, which had previously been thought to have been manufactured at Mesembria in the Black Sea coast, where many examples have been found, can now be placed in Aeolus, again on the basis of archaeometric analysis, another instance of wide pontic distribution of an Aeolian product. The shop produced a unique cup with a high collar rim made in a shallow mold, supporting a date at the end of the Hellenistic period. Ephesus was the single largest supplier of mold-made bowls to the Black Sea cities, accounting for 65% of the reliefware found there. The pictured examples, chosen for their much better than average preservation, give a misleading impression. Most of the material is very fragmentary, and this slide gives a truer portrait of its nature. He had examined about 3,500 vessels from Black Sea sites that, together with the corpus of bowls found on Delos and published by Alfred Lemonnier in 1977, form the basis of her reconstruction of the Ephesian industry. In his monumental study of the Delos material, the work of some 20 years of summers on the island, Lemonnier identified and named a series of workshops and crafted a rough chronology spreading production over 100 years, from the beginning of Athenian control of Delos in 167 to the pirate attack of 69 BCE. In the almost complete absence of contextual information, he dated the workshops on the basis of their naturalism and aesthetic worth, and he divided his workshops roughly into early, middle, late, and end of production in the 1st century. Using the more objective criteria of stamp lengths, especially rim stamps, and with a number of important dated contexts in the Black Sea now at her disposal, Pia suggests a rather different picture of the industry. She divides Ephesian production into 2 large sections, or workshop circles, loosely connected groups sharing design features and workshop practices, and distinguished by the different shapes of their products. Workshop Circle 1 is centered on the production of Menemachus, a potter who habitually signed his molds. His and his associates' bowls are earmarked by a new bowl form, essentially a new shape with a flat bottom, usually decorated with nothing but the signature. Many other potters signed in a similar way, and Pia associates all of them with this workshop circle, which persisted until the end of production in the 1st century. The other group, Workshop Circle 2, is dominated by bowls of the PAR monogram workshop. Its products have the traditional rounded bottom and rosette medallion, familiar from mold-made bowls everywhere. Signatures are very rare. You see 2 examples here, one from Istros, one from Delos, a ligature of at least 3 letters that still conceals the name of the potter. The workshop of the Belle Méduse on the left represents an early stage of this production. Here is the framework of the arrangement. The large workshop circle 1 with gray cells indicating makers using the new flat undecorated base, and workshop circle 2 below with the Belle Méduse and the PAR monograph workshop. There is much more to the new reconstruction and chronology, but comparison with Lemonnier's simpler chronological scheme shows their general similarities. It is uncertain what Pia might have done with the latest stages of the industry. Her work on the chapter stopped before that much was completed. The earlier stages are clear, however. Pia follows Lemonnier in placing Menemachus near the beginning of the widespread production. In this, she is at odds with the other reigning expert on Ephesian production, Kristina Rogel. Rogel lays out her chronology based on material found in Ephesus in this 2021 volume, which, unfortunately, she was obliged by circumstances to publish privately. It has therefore not received the attention that it should, but a comparison of the 2 different analyses of the Ephesian production based on 2 independent bodies of material will certainly prove fruitful for future research. With the definitive removal of Care-Base and the Major Medallion Workshop from the Black Sea, production in the region is reduced to the workshop of Pontic Demetrius, so called to distinguish him from another Demetrius who produced mold-made bowls at Argos, along with bowls made by Getic craftsmen in the indigenous sites further north. Only 3 small Getic fragments made their way to Pia's sites, but Demetrius is represented by about 400 items. Production is documented by molds, 2 from Panticapaeum and 2 from Myrmekion, only 4 kilometers distant across Panticapaean Bay. The products are distinctive in their lack of glaze and their reduced firing. Decoration is simple and repetitive, acanthus, long petals, and occasionally imbricate petals, and was inspired by Aeolus Workshop B, though the shape follows the flat-based model of Ephesian Workshop Circle 1. Pia places its activity in the last quarter of the 2nd century. Distribution is almost completely limited to the Bosporan Kingdom. Part 4 presents the 11 sites where the vessels were found. These include large and well-known sites such as Olbia, where Pia herself worked and published the relief bowls from sector NGS, some of which appear again here, and Istros, where many of the bowls are known from the publication History 11, to which Pia adds more example and corrects many attributions. But smaller and less well-known sites appear as well, such as the fortified farm known as Bolshoi Kastel in the further hinterland of Chersonesos, excavated in the 1980s, but never published. Many smaller sites of the eastern Crimea and Taman Peninsula are also included, like Kiritaki, Porthmion, Volna, and Kipoi. The Volna fragments lie unpublished in the Hermitage. Those from Bolshoi Kastel languish in the Chernomoyskaya Museum of Historical Lore, places that few of us are likely to visit anytime soon. Each chapter offers an orientation to the site and its excavation, and an analysis of its bowls and their sources. Particularly worthy of mention are a number of datable contexts, Bothros 11 and Cistern L at Olbia and the Palace Foundation Trench at Panticapaean, which offer valuable chronological anchors in the 2nd and 3rd quarters of the 2nd century. The book ends with 4 appendices. A brief essay on getting started offers advice on recording, measuring, and drawing mold-made bowls, useful to anyone approaching this type of material for the first time. The value of a 2nd appendix, a concordance to Lamonier's Delos 31, will be clear to anyone who has tried to make the journey from illustration to catalog entry in that infuriating volume. There is also a listing of Pia's new attributions of bowls published there, which differ from Lamonier's in many instances and throw more light on her view of the Ephesian material. Finally, a listing of molds, known as of 2010, is useful, though of course more have come to light since. Although there can never be enough illustrations, Brill gamely agreed to a staggering 2,056 photographs and drawings of reliefware, in addition to 110 figures in the text. The drawings, as you may have noticed from the few that I've shown, are Pia's sketches. Had all gone according to plan, she would no doubt have had them professionally inked. But as they come fresh from her hand, they lend a sense of immediacy to the illustrations. As one reads Mold-Made Bowls of the Black Sea region, it becomes clear that this was a labor of love by a scholar with a true passion for her subject. With its wealth of data and generous illustrations, it will be an exceptionally useful book for those pursuing studies of mold-made bowls and of the cities of the region. But it is destined to become a classic for its reconstruction of the meter medallion workshop, which not only defines a body of material that has long eluded adequate explanation, but also presents a paradigm for the fruitful exploration of workshop structure. For its patience with the tiny detail, combined with its bold embrace of the big picture, its meticulous scholarship, combined with exhilarating flights of creative imagination, the book is a model worthy of emulation, and it is sure to stimulate discussion for many years to come. Thank you.